Hey everybody, so I wanted to do another one of those code along live coding type videos. For anyone who hasn't seen one, it's just where I go on with the basic idea of what I want to build, and then we just code through it on screen, keeping all the errors and mishaps along the way. And for this one, I was thinking the other night, for some reason the game came up, or I thought of the game, and therefore immediately lost. And I thought it would be interesting to create an app to track your streak in the game, or how long the longest period that you've not lost the game is. Now, a lot of you probably know what I'm talking about, but for those of you who don't, the game is this kind of silly psychological meme game that's been around since, I don't know, apparently even the 1990s or something like that. But the basic idea is that if you think about the game, you lose the game. And so there's a lot of little variations of the rules, and I don't think anybody agrees on what exactly they are, but that's the basic idea. So even if you don't know what the game is, you've probably seen people make reference to losing the game, or they say you just lost the game, or things like that. And of course people can sabotage you by mentioning the game, which of course makes you think about it, and therefore you lose. So I wanted to build an app where when you do lose the game, you go into this app, you click I just lost the game, and then it'll track whatever your current streak was. So if it's been 5 days since you pushed that button, then it would set that as your highest streak, or if you had a higher one, then it wouldn't. And then I guess you'd have to hide this app away on your phone somewhere, because every time that you see the app, you'd also lose the game. So it's a bit of a silly idea, of course. The main reason I make these videos is just for a bit of fun and education. So we'll build that. Hopefully it's cool, and yeah, we'll see what happens. Okay, so let's get into building this. So I think to start off, we will just try and set up the layout a little bit. We'll get it looking a little bit nice, and then we'll start building from there. So I've already got an application generated here, just the standard blank Ionic 4 application. And we're just going to change a few things in here, get some stuff going. And so what I want basically is to have the current streak displayed, so the number of days that you've gone without losing the game, and then above that we'll have a your best streak, and then we also need the button to reset the streak and start a new one. So what I'm going to do actually is remove the header completely. I think this entire application is just going to be on the one page. We're not going to worry about creating a custom component or anything like that. We'll just build this functionality into the home page. And I'll get rid of that padding as well. And so what I want to do is I want to have everything centered in the middle of the screen, both vertically and horizontally. And using Flexbox is a very easy way to achieve that. So what I'm going to do here is create a container for all of our score stuff. So I'll just call this score container. And then inside of here, we're going to have 3 separate divs, and that will give these classes as well. So we'll have our best score, and for now we'll just put in a number manually there. We'll have a div for the current streak, and again we'll just put in a dummy number now, just put in a 0. And then below that we're going to have the button to reset the streak. So we'll add some handlers and stuff to this later. So for now, I'll just create an Ion button, and we will we'll make the button say I lost the game. So if we save that, we'll take a look at what we have right now. Okay, so everything so far is just the top left corner. Looks pretty ugly now, obviously. And so now we're going to use Flexbox to get that centered. So I'm going to target this score container here. I'm going to create a new rule for that. We're going to say display flex align items center, and justify content center. So this will center both vertically and horizontally. I think I mentioned this in another video, but every single time I forget which is which. And we're also going to need to give this a height of 100%, so it fills up the entire content area. So we'll just save that and have a look at what we have so far. Okay, so that's it's centered now, but obviously we have our divs going from left to right here, which isn't what we want. We want them to go up and down. So to do that, we can just set the flex direction to column. And For anybody unfamiliar with Flexbox, I'll add a link in the description for some more information on how that works. Okay, so there we've got the basic sort of layout now. Again, it's still obviously pretty ugly, but we have our best streak at the top, followed by the current streak, and then a button to say that you lost the game. So before we move on to the actual functionality, let's try and make this look a little bit prettier than it does right now. I reckon we're going to set a background color. I'm just going to grab something from Flat UI Colors again. Let's go with this green. Again, we have to use the Aussie palette because I'm in Australia and I couldn't possibly use any of the other colors, of course. So I'm going to put this in, we're going to make the content have this background color. So we'll target the Ion content. We could actually just give this a background color instead of making the Ion content area have a green background color, which might actually be easier because when we're styling the content, Ion content, since that's using Shadow DOM, we need to use CSS variables to style that. But if we just add it in here, we should just be able to use a standard background color property here, and that should make the background green. We'll just check before we move on. Yeah, cool. And now I think it would look cool if we actually made this this button just be like a white outline. There was a property in Ionic 3. I think you could just specify outline like this, give it the outline attribute, and it would do that. I don't think that'll do that anymore. No, so that's probably changed. So I'll just look that up. Let's try the changelog for Ionic. So I'm just going to search for outline in here. Actually, no, I don't want the changelog. I want the, what's that migration document? So it's actually the breaking changes document is what I wanted. So let's see if we can find outline in here. Okay, so now it's fill equals outline. So we'll add the fill equals outline property here, and we will jump back into the app. Cool. And then we just want to make that white. So we'll just give it a color of light. And hopefully that should look pretty good. Yeah, so that's cool. I like that. And I guess we'll just make the rest of these a bit prettier as well. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but it doesn't look very good right now. So we'll add a current streak class in here. I'll give it a font size, make that a bit bigger because it's the main thing we want to be looking at. We'll just set that to 3M or something like that. Let's make this white as well. See how that looks. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I'm actually going to add a margin on all the divs in here as well, just to separate them out a bit. We'll add a margin of, I don't know, 20 pixels. And then we'll change this best streak as well, which has a class of best. So we'll set the color to white as well. I'm actually just going to reduce the opacity to make it less pronounced. And yeah, we'll see how that looks. I've given the main div a score, the score container div is getting that margin as well. So what we'll do instead is we'll say, we'll just target the divs inside score container. And we can actually even just do this as well, since we're using SCSS or SAS, which is perhaps a bit more clean and obvious. So we'll do that. So any divs inside of score container will have that margin, but hopefully the score container itself won't. Okay, there we go. So we've got our basic layout now. It looks pretty decent. I could spend probably all day fiddling with this. So we'll just stop there. We'll go with this and we'll actually start working on the functionality. So I'm going to save the best score and when the current streak was started. We want to save that stuff into local storage so we can then retrieve that later. So what we're going to do is set up the Ionic storage module in our application. So I'll have to stop serving that for now and then just run npm install save Ionic storage. Did I spell that wrong? Hopefully not. Okay, so that is installed now. And so then we can jump back in here. And we'll need to set that up in the root module for the application. So we can import the Ionic storage module, which will set up the Ionic storage functionality for us. So we'll import that from Ionic storage, and then we just need to add that as an import Ionic storage module.for root, and then we'll be able to use that in here. So if we import storage from Ionic storage, and we'll just add that to our constructor here. And actually we'll set up the on a init as well whilst we're here. So this will allow us to run some code as soon as this class is initialized. And yeah, so we'll just inject the storage, and now we'll be able to use that throughout this class. And as I mentioned, we are going to be doing just everything in this home page, but at some later point, which we probably won't be doing, but usually if you're using something like storage, it probably would be better to have that in a service of some kind that deals with saving and loading data. And same with this whole streak functionality, that could live inside of its own component. And so we're just going over the basic concept. So we're just going to do everything in here, but just keep that in mind that this isn't really the best design code, and it really should be refactored at some point if you were going to use this for some real application. Okay, so we need, I guess to kick this whole thing off, we're going to have, you come into the application and you'll click the I lost the game button. So what we're going to do is add a click handler to this, and we'll just create a method called lost, I guess, in here. And what we want to do is, first we'll reset what the current streak is. So what I'm going to do is set up a variable here, a class member called current streak. It's going to be a number, and we're going to set that to be 0 to begin with. And then when we lose the game, that's going to get set back to 0. So we'll say this.current streak equals 0. And now that we have that set up, we can replace this with the actual current streak value. But when we do this, we're also going to need to calculate if what the current streak was is our current best. So what we're going to do is check that value against the one that is currently in storage. So if we say this.storage.get, and we'll call this, we'll just call it high score because that's pretty obvious. So what we're going to do is if there's a score, we want to check if it is higher than the current streak. So all we need to do is say if this.current streak is greater than score, then we'll just set high score to that. So we'll say this.storage.set high score to this.current streak. So that should be most of what we need to do there, but there is also the, I guess the harder thing of actually figuring out what the current streak is. And to do that, we're gonna have to work with some dates, which is probably one of my least favorite things to do. But what we're going to do basically is whenever someone says they lost the game, down here we're going to set a new start time. And so we're just going to have an ISO string, which represents a date. We're going to store that in storage. And then when someone says that they've lost, then we're going to compare the current date using an ISO string to the initial one. And we'll calculate the amount of days in between those two dates. And actually we'll do that when we initialize the application so we can show this current streak. So what we're going to do on initialization here is we're going to do this.storage.get, and we'll get current initial time, I guess. So we'll grab that, we'll just call that time. Actually, I'll call that original time. So the time when the user last clicked the lost button, which we'll set this value down here as well. And then we want to compare that time to the original time to the current time. So if there is a time, we'll do some calculation here. Otherwise, well, we don't need to do anything. The current streak will just remain at 0. Because if there isn't a current time, then it'll be 0. So we can get the two dates now. So we can say let original date equal new date time. So that's going to use the ISO string that we're going to store in storage. And it's going to create a new date based on that. So we can work with this date object. And then we'll let current date equal new date. And that'll just create a new date object which equals the current time. Then we can work out the difference between those two dates by saying let difference equal, we'll say the current date, take the original date. Oh, actually that's not going to work because we need to actually do get time, I think, to get the milliseconds. Hopefully that works. And then we need to convert those milliseconds into days. So to do that, we can say let days equal, and you can use libraries, by the way, to help manage time, but this is a reasonably simple thing to do. So we can just use the date object for this. And so the days should be, let's say, the difference divided by, so this is the number of milliseconds between those 2 days. And so then we have 1,000 milliseconds in a minute, and then 60 minutes in an hour, and then 24 hours in a day. So that should give us a day value. And then we can just set the current streak to days. So I'm just going to save this, and I'm not actually serving the application right now. So I'm going to reserve the application just to make sure we're not making any errors right now. It's a little bit difficult to test this because obviously we can't sit around for 3 days to see if it's working. So we'll have to play around with it manually a little bit. Okay, so the application has loaded, so that's a good sign. So I'm not making any obvious errors just yet. So let's continue working on this then. I need to store that original time value. We need to create that when we're starting a new streak, which we do when we click the lost button. And whilst I'm thinking about it, we also need to have the high score value as well. So we'll just set that up now. So private high score number, again, we'll just set it to 0 initially. And then we're going to do the same thing as we did here, basically. So we're going to say this.storage.get high score dot then score. And then we'll just set, if there's a score, we'll set high score to that. And so since we're doing everything in the homepage now, I guess you can start to see things getting a little bit messy here. And we're doing things like, this is kind of the same as this. We should probably really have some kind of service with a method to get the score. And then so we can do something like, get score, then do something with that. Again, we're not going to worry about refactoring this code in this video, but just keep it in mind that this code could be improved a lot. Okay, so now let's focus on creating that new start time or original time. So basically we just want to get the current date, whatever it is, and store an ISO string of that in storage. So what we can do is we'll say let current date equal new date, and that's just going to default to whatever the current date and time is. And then we can store that in this with this .storage .set, and we'll set the, what was it, original time, and we'll set that to current date get ISO string. Is that the ISO string? To ISO string. That's it. Glad I have these little prompts here. Okay, so that allows us to store that date in storage, because we can only store simple values like strings, and we can store objects in storage, but this the date object, we can't store that in storage. We have to convert it to some other format. Okay, so now when we click the lost button, we're overriding our original time with the current date, and so that next time we click the lost button, it's going to overwrite that, and when we start the application, it's going to check the values and calculate the current streak based on that new original time. And of course, if we just clicked I lost the game, the next time you start the app, it's going to say it's going to be 0. I guess there is a bit of a flaw in this, in that if you were to have the application open for more than a day, since we don't check the new values until we run this on init function, technically that only runs when you start the app. So if you were to have the app open for more than a day, the value isn't going to update. It's not something I'm really going to worry about for this scenario, but just another thing to be aware of. Okay, so let's go click some stuff. I think this should be most of what is required. We should actually probably add the high score to here. So we'll save that, jump into the browser, and we just want to make sure nothing is failing when we restart the app. If I click I lost the game, obviously nothing happens because everything's 0 at the moment. But yeah, I just want to set some stuff, make sure that nothing weird is happening like this. So this is a good error. And so we're using the milliseconds to figure out the difference in the days. The problem with that is obviously you're going to have these sort of fractions of numbers. So what we need to do with the current streak is not just set it to the difference between the days. Let's just have a look at what that is, just for curiosity's sake, since we can't see the full number on here. Okay, so the difference there is 44,536 milliseconds. We actually want, I want to have a look at the days value. That's the one I'm interested in. Okay, so you have 0.000071, and so that's just like a small fraction of a day because I just clicked it and obviously not much time has passed. So what we want to do is round this down. So anything below 1 is 0 days, and then anything below 2 and above 1 is 1 day. So what we can do is we'll set that to math.floor, and that'll just round that down, which should give us the correct amount of days. The good news is that clearly we are getting values from storage and setting them up here, so that implies to me that it's actually working. So I'll click I lost the game again, refresh that, and yeah, now we just have 0. So it seems to be working. Let's just set some dummy values just to check things. So when we start a new game, let's just say we'll make the current date some date in the past. So right now it is the 29th of October 2018. So what I'm going to do is set this instead to, let's go 2018, July the 10th. I don't know why it was so difficult for me to come up with that. But yeah, we'll go with that. So that's what, like August, September, October, three months and something. So maybe like close to 100 days. So we'll save that. And so now when we start this new game, we're tricking it into thinking our original date is going to be sometime in the past. So I'll click I lost the game. And again, as I said, this isn't, we're only checking the values when we start the application. And so usually this wouldn't be a problem because obviously we'd still be on 0 days when we've just started the application. But in this case, it should actually be 110 days because we cheated. So I should be able to now get rid of that. So we'll go back to not cheating. And then when we click the lose button again, it should check this new score against our best, which we should probably rename that because it's really the previous best, because if the current streak is higher, it's not being updated there, which I'm going to do that now just so I don't forget. So we'll say previous best. So the previous best is 0. Our current streak is 110. If I click I lost the game, sets that back to 0. And it should set our previous best to that new value, but we're actually only setting, where are we? Yeah, we're only setting the score in storage, which will, when we refresh the application and it grabs that value again, that should update. But in this case, we probably should also set the value manually in here. So we'll say this.highscore equals this.current streak, just so it immediately updates when we click I lost the game. So I'll hit save, let the application reload, and the previous best didn't actually update there. Why didn't that? Well, actually, we can change this because we already have the score value loaded in, so there's no reason to get it again. So I'm going to change the way we do this, and we're going to say if this.highscore is, rather if this.current streak is greater than this.highscore, we'll say this.highscore equals this.current streak, and we'll set it. So we'll do that same thing here. Set that in storage to whatever the current streak is, and then we can get rid of this code. Then we reset the current streak and do all this stuff. So let's try that again with our fake values. So again, we'll set our original start date to 2018, we'll say 10th of July again. So we'll let that refresh, and then we will hit I lost the game, and then we will stop cheating by removing that. And we should have our new streak, 110 days there, previous best 0. So now when I click lost, it should check the current streak, which is 110, which will be higher than the high score, which is 0. So this should run, so it should update the high score to the current streak and also set that in storage. So hopefully that works. Okay, so we'll click I lost the game, sets our streak to 0, and it sets our previous best to 110, so that's working. So now all we need to do is refresh the application, and as long as that still says previous best 110, we're all good, and it does. Okay, so we finished our simple application there. So basically now this number, each day it's going to increase. So it's going to go 1, 2, 3, and then whenever we hit I lost the game, it's going to reset this, and then if it was our highest streak, it'll overwrite the current previous best. And again, as I mentioned, there's probably a little bit of room to improve this. When I build stuff live on camera, I'm not always writing the best code, but hopefully that was reasonably interesting. One thing to keep in mind with local storage like we're using is that it is possible for the operating system to clear this the browser storage. So if you're looking for something a bit more secure, you should probably use the SQLite plugin to store the data in a native database, which reduces that risk of your data just being wiped randomly. But for this sort of just simple example, it's fine to use something like this, I think. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this video. If you didn't previously know about the game, you do now, so I hope you have fun playing, and I will see you in the next video.